Hey, how's it going? Andy here. Welcome back to The 90s Are Rad. Today, as you see from the title, we're finally ranking all of the 90s and early 2000s to like 2003 Cartoon Network shows. So, full disclaimer, this is just my personal opinion. So if you feel like I ranked the show lower or higher than what it should have been, just let me know in the comments. Also, there's going to be certain shows like the original Hanna-Barbera cartoons, some of the WB or Turner, whatever you want to call it, like Looney Tunes, stuff like that. That's not going to be on here. Also, don't hate me, Teen Titans is not going to be on here because it was also on WB Kids. But if I were to include it, it would obviously be an S because that's just a legendary show. So without further ado, let's get started. So coming in at number 1, we have The Moxy Show. This is a show I don't remember watching, but I went back and I watched a couple episodes, did a little bit of research, and basically what it was is this janitor dog named Moxy would hijack, the feed on like Sundays, and basically just provide like commentary on some of the classic Hanna-Barbera shows, like your Flintstones, your Scooby-Doo's, Jetsons, stuff like that. It's not bad. It's not a perfect show. For me, it's just kind of average. And for it being arguably Cartoon Network's first original programming, there's some debate whether or not it's considered original. For me, I would count it as an original programming. It took something that we all knew and kind of made it unique. But, like I said, it wasn't perfect. It was kind of it did have, some motion capture and some 3D animation, which was kind of cool. Definitely unique for that time. But overall, like I said, it was just kind of boring. Not the most exciting. So with that being said, I'm going to give The Moxy Show a C. Next up, we have Space Ghost, Coast to Coast. This show is basically a... think of like Conan O'Brien, but cartoon form. It's just a really funny, like, animated talk show. And it's great. It's hilarious. It has some really good humor. Some of the interviews are great. Animation's pretty solid. For me, this show is just unique. It took a concept that we're all kind of familiar with, talk shows, stuff like that, and just made it unique. For one, it's animated. Really funny jokes. It's really good. Space Ghost, Coast to Coast gets an A. Next up, we have What a Cartoon. So if you're familiar with Nickelodeon, you might remember Oh Yeah Cartoon. Pretty much same exact thing, same exact concept. It was shorts of cartoons that were eventually going to become shows. It was kind of like testing the audience, see what they liked, what they didn't like. A lot of these shows did end up becoming their own show, like Powerpuff Girls, Dexters Lab, I believe Cow and Chicken, I Am Weasel, and I think Courage might have been on there. I might be wrong. But there was a lot of really big cartoons, or what became really big cartoons, on What a Cartoon. I said cartoon way too many times. But this show, it was good. Not every short that they had was great or was good. But for me, What a Cartoon gets an A. Now we are getting into this really amazing era of Cartoon Network. When you think of 90s Cartoon Network, you think of these shows. It's like, yes, this is what made Cartoon Network Cartoon Network. So we have Dexters Lab, Dexter's Laboratory. I freaking love this show. I love this cartoon. Clever writing. It's kind of sciencey. I like science. I teach science. Cool. It's science. It had these cool, unique, like little mini segments in it. You had like an Avengers or a superhero type little short inside of it, which is cool. Really good writing, voice acting is great. It's generally like a perfect cartoon. Like if you go back and watch it, you're still gonna laugh. You're gonna be like, oh, that's funny. Theme song, good. It's simple. It goes very well with what the cartoon is. So Dexter's Lab, for me, gets an S. So next up we have Johnny Bravo, which I love Johnny Bravo. I know it's not gonna be for everybody, but Johnny Bravo, I thought it was funny. I'm just going to read what IMDb says about it because it describes it perfectly. The misadventures of a dumb blonde egomaniac who severely overestimates his own manliness and his supposed success with women. It's so funny. It's oh man, it's great. It's great. What's cool about it is I believe Butch Hartman, who went on to make Fairly Odd Parents, and Seth MacFarlane, who went on to make Family Guy, I believe they both got their start on Johnny Bravo, or they at least worked on it, which is awesome. You can kind of see some of the influences, or their, like, I guess, style in the show. But Johnny Bravo is like this, he sounds like a really bad Elvis impersonator. But it's funny, it's not perfect. I remember there being like a small little weird subplot with Scooby-Doo, because it's made by Hanna-Barbera, so they can do that. There's like this weird Scooby-Doo crossover, if I remember correctly. It wasn't a perfect show, no, but it was great. I'm going to give Johnny Bravo an A. Next up, we have Cow and Chicken. Think of this similar to like a Rocko's Modern Life, or maybe Ren and Stimpy, in terms of humor and kind of like gross out style. Not to that extent, but there's definitely a lot of adult jokes. Also, the devil, there's a devil character in it who's naked. You see his butt like all the time. But yeah, this show is pretty funny. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of like that weird gross out type humor, which this kind of had a lot of. There's a lot of like fart jokes or fart humor in it, which I'm not the biggest fan of. But I do appreciate it. They did have like little shorts in it for I Am Weasel, if I remember correctly, which I Am Weasel is actually going to be next. But Cow and Chicken, for what it is, good animation, not always the best jokes, but I'm going to give Cow and Chicken a B. Next up, we have I Am Weasel, which this show, depending on my day, will either rank higher or lower. Some days I really like it, some days I don't. But it stars Weasel and IR Baboon. IR Baboon, what's the best way to put it? If you are a fan of the Angry Beavers, I Am Weasel is like Norm, then IR Baboon is like Daggett. They have that very similar like dynamic. It's good. It's not as good. Like I said, depending on my day, I either really like it or I'm just kind of like meh about it. Right now, I'm just kind of like meh about it. But watch it. There's clips of all these shows on YouTube. Check it out. It's funny some days, other days, not so much. So for that, I'm just gonna give it a C. Next up, we have Powerpuff Girls. This show stars girls, obviously, Powerpuff Girls, which you would think, oh, it's going to be a girly show. It's not. Like, this show is awesome, and it just kind of goes to show, like, it doesn't matter if your characters are male or female or whatever, that as long as the writing's good, as long as it's well written, well animated, like, people are going to like it. I know plenty of dudes that love Powerpuff Girls. I'm one of them. It's great. You have great characters. Powerpuff Girls are superheroes that get made from their professor, which is their dad. He makes them sugar, spice, everything nice, and chemical X. It's really good. They have really good villains. Yeah, Mojo Jojo, that's their main bad guy that they go against. The mayor is funny. His assistant is funny. You never see her face, but she's supposed to be like this super like beautiful lady. Yeah, a lot of really good villains. Really good just animated show in general. Again, when you think of Cartoon Network in the 90s, you think of Powerpuff Girls. That's one of the very first shows I think of when I think of it. So it's going to come as no surprise, but I'm going to rank Powerpuff Girls an S. Next up, we have Ed, and Eddy. I freaking love this show. It's one of those shows, it's either you love it or you kind of hate it. I love it. I remember when we first got Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island on VHS. That came out before Ed, and Eddy came out. There was a little teaser for it. I remember seeing teasers for it. I was like, what is this show? I was pretty hyped for it because I was like, I didn't know what it was. Obviously, you couldn't just look it up. There wasn't like spoilers or leaks on like the internet. That wasn't really a thing back then. So when I finally saw it, I fell in love. It's so funny, so stupid. They get themselves in the dumbest scenarios, and it's great. It's great. So for me, Ed and Eddy gets an S. If you were like, nah, I hate the show, I get it. But for me, this is like top tier. I love it. Next we have Mike, Lou, and Oog. Or Ugg. I never know how to say it. This show was pretty good for what it was. The art style isn't my favorite, but the writing was pretty solid. Characters pretty solid. I don't remember if they're in prehistoric times or if they're... I might be remembering it wrong. Check it out. There's some clips on YouTube. I'll link it down below. But I went back and rewatched it, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely above average, better than what I remember it being. It wasn't a show that I was like, oh, let me go home and go watch this. If I was at like a friend's house, or hey, yo, we gotta go watch this. It wasn't one of those shows. But it was good. If it was on, I wouldn't turn it off. So Mike, Lou, and Ook gets a B. Next up, we have arguably one of the best shows on Cartoon Network, and that is Courage the Cowardly Dog. Saying that probably spoils what my ranking's gonna be. Courage the Cowardly Dog is amazing. I like horror. I was a bit scaredy cat back in the day, so this show definitely freaked me out a little bit. But it's great. Great storytelling, great characters, just the dynamic. And it has surprisingly a lot of heart. Like, there's some moments where, there's supposed to be like this villain, and then Kurt's just like, oh, he's just misunderstood. So let's be friends with him and befriend him, and just like get to know him. I taught you not to judge someone before you know them. They might be terrifying, but maybe they went through something, and they're not actually terrifying. They're really nice. It's just maybe their appearance is terrifying, But no, there was some generally scary stuff, like the Slab episode, terrifying. But yeah, no, this show is great. If you've never seen Courage the Cowardly Dog, if you have HBO Max, or Max, whatever it's called nowadays, go put it on right now. Stop watching this video. Go watch it. If you're into horror and you want something new to watch Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's great. There's a little bit of gross out, but it's not over the top. It actually fits into what they're doing, like, because monsters, they can be kind of gross. But yeah, so it's great. Obviously, it's an S. Next, we have Sheep in the Big City. I wasn't the biggest fan of this show. It's one of those shows I don't really remember too much. So I had to go back. I had to watch it and be like, have I ever seen this? And then after watching like a little bit of it, I was like, oh, that does look familiar. It was just okay. Not my favorite. If someone was like, oh, I actually enjoyed the show quite a bit, I could see that, but it's not for me. Animation's not bad. Sheep in the Big City gets a C. Next up, we have Time Squad. This is a very similar thing for me with I Am Weasel. It's either some days I really like it, some days I just don't really care for it. It's about this group of people, these 3 people that can go back in time, change things, stop things from happening. It's supposed to be funny. Not everything's funny. The voice of Bobby Hill is one of the main characters in it. I forget that person's name. But it's not bad. Animation's pretty good. Like I said, I remember enjoying it. I went back, watched it. I'm like, eh. And then I went back, watched it again. I was like, oh, it's not too bad. So I'm just going to give it a C for now. If someone was like, yo, this show was actually really great, I can see that. Like I said, I remember enjoying it. Went back, watched it. Didn't really like it. Went back. It was actually just a couple days ago. Rewatched it again. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's really not too bad. I guess it's pretty average. So, Time Squad, C. Next up, we have Samurai Jack. Not gonna lie, when this first came out, I was not really into it. I was just like, nah, I'm good. It was the art style I wasn't really the biggest fan of, which happens. But it wasn't until after season 2, I went back, I started kind of watching some of the reruns at my friend Abe's house, because I remember we watched a couple episodes there, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And then I just would keep watching reruns and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, this show's fantastic. Obviously, it had like a huge I don't want to say cult following, but it had a really good following. If I'm not mistaken, it was canceled. And then they brought it back in Toonami, 2010 sometime. But this show is fantastic. If you've never seen it, again, if you have HBO Max, whatever it's called, watch it. It's great. The animation's great. Voice acting's phenomenal. Art direction, like I said, I wasn't the biggest fan, but I was also like 8 or 9 when it came out, so I didn't know anything. But it's great. Highly recommend it. Samurai Jack gets an S. Next, we have Grim and Evil, which I feel like a lot of people don't remember was a thing. So Grim and Evil was the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and Evil con Carne. Combined, it was the show that gave them their start. So before there were separate shows, it was Grim and Evil. So it would split the episode into two 15-minute or 12-minute whatever segments, and it would be Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, or it'd be Evil con Carne. Great, hilarious. If you've never seen both of those shows, definitely recommend them. I don't know if you can actually find Evil con Carne. I don't know if that's on Max. If it is, I would give it a shot. I feel like it's definitely underrated. Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy definitely kind of outshines it a little bit. But Grim and Evil, just because of what it is, the two shows that it is, it's going to get an A. Next, we have The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Hilarious. It's so good. The writing's great. The characters are great. Billy is kind of dumb, but in a very lovable way. Sometimes it could be a little too much, but I feel like they kind of knew when to draw it back. Mandy is just basically a goth, hates everything type of person, but looking at her, she has blonde hair, and you wouldn't guess that. She looks sweet and innocent pretty much. But this show is fantastic. If you've never seen it, watch it. Watch it. Definitely one of the better early 2000 Cartoon Network shows that came out. So, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy gets an S. Then we have Evil con Carne. Like I said, I feel like this is a very underrated show. I think it's good. It has the same art style as Billy and Mandy, so art style is great. Animation's great. Voice acting is good. It wasn't as funny, There was just something about Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy that, like I said, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just the writing on it was just a little bit better. But Evil con Carne is still super good. If you've never seen it, give it a shot. Like I said, to me, it's definitely one of those underrated shows that not everybody talks about or remembers. So definitely give it a shot. Evil con Carne gets an A. So we are on our last 3 shows. This next one, I just don't really like, and that's going to be Whatever Happened to Robot Jones. There's just something about it that I just don't like. I know what it is. It's a mix between the art style, the writing, and the voice acting. To me, it seems like, I don't know which show came out first. I don't know if it was Robot Jones or My Life as a Teenage Robot. I think they came out around the same time. But My Life as a Teenage Robot, for me, did this concept a little bit better. It's not one for one, same exact concept. Robot Jones is a robot family. This little robot guy basically just wants to be like a human, kind of, I think. I don't know. I was so bored watching it that I couldn't really keep track. And I kept pausing it, going to other things. So if you're no, give it a shot. It's way better than what you think. Maybe I'll go back and watch it. But for now, Robot Jones gets a D. Next, second to last, Codename Kids Next Door. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Like I said, this was the era of Cartoon Network that kind of outshined Nickelodeon when it came to the animated shows. Definitely kind of outshined it. The mid 2000s, way better than what Nickelodeon had. At least for the most part. It had some really solid stuff. Codename Kids Next Door was just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. My favorite episode was the Brawl episode, the Battle Ready Armor. Hilarious. Like, they always had these abbreviations. Is that what they are? Abbreviations? I don't know. They would take a word and they would just give it like a totally different meaning. And it's great. Fantastic writing. They're basically superheroes, spies. They're fighting against adults. And it's just great. It's honestly just hilarious. So Codename Kid Next Door gets an S. And then, last but not least, we have Clone Wars, which, yes, is a Cartoon Network original. Even though it's based off of a different property, Clone Wars was amazing. Like, I was really big into the prequels. Well, shouldn't say really big into the prequels. First one was kind of eh, but Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, fantastic. Fantastic. I love them. I don't care what you say. They're great. I feel like they get too much hate. But this cartoon is, for once, considered canon. So it goes into more of the actual Clone Wars section of Clone Wars. So it's really, the animation's great, voice acting's great, storytelling is top notch. It's really good. This show obviously had a really big following, and there's a reason for that. It's fantastic. It's one of the better Star Wars adventures that's currently out. Like, you can go back and watch these now and be like, that's fantastic. If you're into Star Wars, watch it. You're going to love it. Obviously, it's getting an S. So that's going to be it. That is my ranking of all the 90s and somewhat early 2000 Cartoon Network cartoons. If you agreed with my list, or if you didn't, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay rad. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.